Tell your wife to watch her mouth. That's what the taller one said, Denise Harper's oldest son, Tyler, as he stepped up onto my porch like he owned it. His brother, Chase, stood a few feet behind him, arms crossed, smirking like this was all some kind of game. The November wind rattled the oak tree out front, scattering brittle leaves across the gravel. My wife, Lily, stood frozen behind the screen door, clutching her coffee mug like it was the only thing keeping her steady. I didn't say a word at first, just watched them. Two overgrown bullies sent by their mother because she didn't have the courage to face me herself. Tyler's voice cracked a little when he repeated himself. You hear me, man? Your wife's been spreading lies about my mom. Step off my porch, I said, calm but firm. He laughed. You think we're scared of you? Chase chimed in. Mom said you used to be in the Marines. Guess she wants to see if you still fight like one. Lily's hand trembled behind the door. Ethan, please. I turned my head slightly. Go inside, babe. Denise was parked halfway down the street in her pearl-white SUV, window cracked, phone in her hand, recording. I saw the glint of the screen even from where I stood. Classic Denise. She wanted me to lose control. Tyler stepped closer until he was practically breathing the same air I was. The scent of cheap cologne and arrogance filled the gap between us. Apologize to my mom, he demanded. For what? For calling her a liar. I smiled, just a fraction. If the shoe fits. His hand twitched. He almost swung. Almost. But something in my eyes must have told him that would be a mistake. I didn't flinch, didn't raise my voice. I just took one step forward, slow and steady, until he backed down off my porch without realizing it. You done? I asked. He muttered something I didn't catch, then nodded to Chase. They turned and stormed back toward the SUV. Denise rolled down her window, and her voice, high, clipped, dripping with fake authority, sliced through the quiet street. You'll be hearing from the HOA, Mr. Cole. Threatening my family violates Section 4 of our Community Safety Code. I laughed, short and sharp. You sent your family to my house, Denise. She smiled like a politician under a spotlight. That's your version. Mine's on video. The SUV door slammed and the tires screeched as she drove off. Lily opened the door and stepped out, pale as a ghost. Ethan, what was that? She sent her sons here? Yeah, I said quietly. And she wanted me to react. Lily's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. I can't live like this anymore. Every time I walk to the mailbox, she's there with that phone out. What did we even do? I reached for her hand. We moved in. That's all it took. The wind picked up again, rustling the oak's branches. A few neighbors peeked through. Blinds but didn't come out. Laura Kemp stood halfway down the block, arms folded, pretending to rake leaves she'd already raked twice this morning. Our eyes met for a split second. She looked away fast. Denise had them all scared. That's how she ruled. Intimidation, fake violations, and whispered threats. But this was different. Sending her sons, that crossed a line. What would you do if your neighbor weaponized her own family to scare yours? If your wife stood shaking while someone's adult kids showed up to your door because their mother ran the HOA? I looked back at the house, at Lily trying to calm her breathing, and felt something shift inside me. That was the moment I stopped tolerating it. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Stick around, hit subscribe, because this story's just getting started. Let me back up and tell you how this started. When Lily and I first moved into Maple Ridge Estates, it was supposed to be a fresh start. After 10 years of military life, I wanted quiet mornings and time to build my own business. I started a small renovation company. Just me, my tools, and a pickup truck. The house had good bones, and that oak tree out front was planted by my dad before he passed. I promised myself I'd keep it standing no matter what. Denise Harper, the HOA president, greeted us the first week with a smile that never touched her eyes. She handed us a folder of community expectations, pages of rules written like commandments, paint color codes, lawn height limits, even mailbox standards. I didn't think much of it back then. But 3 weeks later, the first violation notice showed up. Improper fence height, then another for unauthorized vehicle, my work truck. By the fourth notice, it was clear Denise had a problem with me. And when she realized intimidation didn't work on me, she found a new target, my wife. The next morning, I found another envelope slipped under our front door. The paper crinkled in my hand, almost like it had been handled with relish. Denise Harper's neat, looping handwriting accused Lily of allowing unsafe activities in the yard, whatever that was supposed to mean. I tore it open slowly, scanning the text. Another violation, another petty attack. Lily leaned against the oak tree, arms crossed, sunlight glinting off her hair. "She never stops," she said. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but exhaustion. "Every day it's something else." I nodded, folding the letter. "And every day, she's losing her mind more." Down the street, I saw Laura Kemp again, crouched by her mailbox. She looked up at me, then down, pretending to adjust a plant in her flower bed. I caught the briefest flash of hesitation in her eyes. A silent question. She knew. She always knew. But fear kept her frozen. Denise wasn't subtle. Over the next week, her tactics escalated. Lawn inspections at dawn, notes left on our truck about parking, violations that didn't exist, a knock on the door at night from a neighbor claiming community concern. Every time, I handled it with calm precision, documenting everything. I knew her playbook. After 10 years of renovations and years in the Marines, observation was my advantage. One afternoon, Lily was outside trimming a hedge when Tyler and Chase showed up again, this time with a bicycle blocking the driveway. Lily froze, hands still on the clippers. I came out just in time to see them swagger back toward the street, grinning, thinking they'd intimidated her again. I didn't shout. I simply stepped into the light, voice steady. "You two are done here," I said. Tyler's eyes narrowed. "Mom said—" "I don't care what your mom said," I interrupted. "Go home." Chase muttered something under his breath and nudged Tyler. They retreated, but I knew Denise was watching from her SUV, savoring every second. After they left, Lily's shoulders sagged. "Why is this happening to us?" I pulled her close. "Because they can, and because we're standing in the way." That evening, I saw Laura again, peeking from behind her curtains. I waved, and she half smiled, half shrugged. I knew she feared Denise, but the look in her eyes said more. She wanted to help, but she wasn't sure how. Over the next few days, Denise added another layer to her harassment: neighborhood gossip, notes from neighbors who saw something suspicious, friendly warnings disguised as concern. Every message painted me as the villain, a troublemaker disrupting the peace. I filed each one, noting timestamps, names, and details. I wasn't just keeping records, I was building a map of her tactics. One evening, while reviewing the week's notices on the porch, I heard a quiet voice behind me. You're handling this well." I looked up. Laura Kemp was standing by the edge of the lawn, hands twisted together. I don't know if I should say anything, but she's controlling everyone. You have to be careful." Her gaze flicked to the street, toward Denise's house. "She'll come after anyone who tries to help." "I know," I said softly, "and I know you've seen it happen. That's why your voice matters." Laura's hand hovered over her mouth. She was torn between self-preservation and the truth she'd witnessed. I could see it, every micro-expression of fear, doubt, and loyalty battling inside her. Finally, she stepped back, nodding just slightly. I'll watch," she whispered. That was all I needed for now. Even a silent ally counts. As night fell, the old oak tree cast long shadows over the yard. The branches swayed in the wind, and I traced my fingers along the bark, remembering my father's hands pressing the sap into the grooves years ago. This wasn't just about violations or petty threats anymore. It was about protecting a legacy, our home, our family, and Denise Harper. She might control the HOA rules, the gossip, even her own sons, but she didn't control me, not my home, not my wife, not the truth. Laura Kemp might still be hesitant, still afraid, but I could see the spark in her. She'd been watching closely, and sooner or later, she'd make the choice. And when she did, her knowledge would become a weapon we could wield, carefully, precisely, professionally. For now, Maple Ridge Estates slept under a veil of quiet tension. But I knew the calm was temporary. Denise's push would continue, but every action she took, every son she sent, every violation she penned was cataloged, observed, and stored. Her reign of intimidation was under professional scrutiny, and every expert knows, the more they push, the easier they are to expose. The next morning, a thin layer of frost covered the maple leaves lining our driveway. I stepped outside, coffee in hand, to find yet another violation notice pinned to the oak tree. A handwritten scrawl claiming obstructed view of sidewalk because Lily's hanging planter cast a shadow. I crumpled it in my fist, trying not to let anger show. Lily touched my arm lightly. "Ethan, maybe we should just let this go. It's exhausting." I shook my head. "No, this is her testing boundaries. Every rule she bends, every sun she sends. It's all calculated." From the corner of my eye, I saw Laura Kemp across the street, kneeling to adjust the soil around her tulips. She froze when she noticed me watching, then straightened, brushing her hands against her coat. Her movement was tense, hesitant, as if she feared Denise's gaze might pierce the distance between our houses. I called her gently. "Laura, come over, even for a minute." She hesitated, glancing nervously toward Denise's home. The SUV was gone, but the shadow of fear lingered. Her lips parted, closed, then finally she walked over, slow steps betraying every ounce of hesitation. "You know what she's doing is wrong," I said quietly, not wanting Lily to hear. "You see it every day." Laura's eyes darted down to the frost at her feet, twisting the hem of her jacket. I do, but I can't. If she finds out I'm talking to you, she'll make my life hell." I nodded. "I get it, but watching silently doesn't help anyone, especially Lily." Her hands trembled slightly as she reached into her coat pocket, fingering something small, maybe a key or a piece of paper. She swallowed hard, then shook her head. "I don't know if I can. I've tried helping others before. It never ends well." I leaned in, lowering my voice further. "This isn't just about helping someone else. It's about standing up for what's right. And you have an advantage. You see things most people don't. Every inspection, every note, every stunt she pulls. You know her patterns." Laura flinched, her body rigid. I do. But the fear, I can't." Her voice broke. The first crack in the wall of composure she'd built. She looked over her shoulder at Denise's house, like expecting the HOA president to materialize and scold her from the window. I gestured toward the oak tree. "Look at this. This tree, my dad planted it. It survived storms, wind, years of neglect. And now, Denise thinks she can uproot our peace just because she controls a few rules?" Her gaze softened slightly. I could see the conflict in her eyes. Loyalty to her own safety battling a moral truth she couldn't ignore. She took a small step closer. I hate seeing her do this," she whispered. "But I've seen what happens when people push back. It's ugly." I nodded again, giving her the space to breathe. "I'm not asking you to be reckless. I just need you to notice, to observe everything she does, every little thing. That's how you help without exposing yourself." Laura's shoulders relaxed, just a fraction. The tension in her hands eased. I knew it wasn't a full commitment, not yet, but it was the first crack, and that's all I needed for now. Later that evening, Lily and I reviewed the week's notices at the kitchen table. The wind rattled the window panes, carrying the faint sound of children laughing from down the street. Denise's sons, no doubt. I marked each document, time-stamped each photo I'd taken of violations that didn't exist, and started linking them. "Ethan," Lily said quietly. "Laura, she looked scared today, but something changed, didn't it?" I nodded. "She's conflicted. She wants to help, just needs the right way to do it." Outside, the old oak tree cast long shadows across the yard. The light from the street lamps glinted off frost-coated leaves, a reminder of resilience. Denise's tactics were relentless, but every step she took to intimidate us was catalogued, observed, and understood. And now, with Laura's hesitant watchfulness, I had an insider's perspective I could use. I knew the coming weeks would test all of us. Every confrontation, every notice, every look from a neighbor could become a piece of the puzzle. And Laura, she would eventually decide whether to remain silent or step forward as a crucial ally. For now, her fear was real, her hesitation palpable. But even hesitation has weight, and every action, however small, mattered in the fight to expose the truth. We weren't powerless, not yet. Not while observation, timing, and professional insight were on our side. The next morning, I arrived at the property line and noticed fresh tire tracks cutting across the side yard. Denise's SUV had been back overnight, I realized. Her sons, or some hired kid, had driven onto our grass again. The frost had melted just enough to leave clear impressions, like a signature on a crime scene. I snapped photos, circling each mark with precision, making sure the angle caught the tire pattern and the proximity to our foundation. Lily peeked out from the kitchen window. "Did she... again?" I nodded without looking up. "Yes, and this time, she's getting sloppy." The sound of gravel crunching made us both freeze. Laura Kemp appeared at the edge of her driveway, shivering in a thin coat. She held a small notebook in her hands, fingers tapping nervously against the cover. I waved. She glanced around as if expecting Denise to materialize at any second. Then she tentatively approached. I noticed something," she whispered, glancing at the tire tracks. "Her kids, or whoever drives that SUV. They leave patterns. Every time they come here, they follow the same route." I crouched, pointing to the indentations. "Exactly. Every single violation, every trespass, can be traced if you know where to look. That's the advantage we have. Observation, detail, precision." Laura's eyes widened. "So, we're watching them, in real time?" "Yes, and documenting," I said. "Every moment, every action is evidence of harassment. If Denise thinks she's intimidating us, she's just building a record we can use." A sudden screech of brakes made us both turn. Tyler and Chase were back, this time circling the cul-de-sac on their bikes like predators. Lily went inside quickly, and I stepped out to meet them, hands open but body tense. "Stop," I said firmly. "Now." Tyler laughed, glancing at his brother. "Or what?" I didn't flinch. "Or we'll make sure your mother understands the consequences of trespassing and harassment. Every move you make is being documented." They stared for a moment, hesitation flickering across their faces. I didn't need to raise my voice. My posture, calm but deliberate, said everything. Finally, they wheeled their bikes away, muttering under their breaths. After they left, I motioned to Laura. "See? Small details, repetition, patterns, that's the key. Your observations matter more than you think." She nodded, still nervous. I can do that, but I'm scared." I placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Good. Keep that fear. It keeps you sharp. Don't confront her directly. Just watch, record, notice. Your fear is a tool, not a weakness." Later, I reviewed the week's digital trail. Emails from Denise, timestamps of inspection notices, screenshots from neighbors' texts quoting her words. Everything aligned. Each act of harassment left a trace, and every trace told a story. Lily joined me on the porch, hands folded around her coffee mug. "You really think this will work? Just watching and recording?" I smiled faintly. "Yes. Professional observation isn't passive, it's strategic. Every misstep Denise makes, every sloppy threat, builds a picture. Eventually she'll overextend, and we'll have exactly what we need." The frost returned overnight, coating the grass and tire tracks like a forensic outline. Laura showed up briefly before dark, notebook in hand, scribbling notes as I explained. Patterns, time intervals, and repeated behaviors. She didn't say much, but her eyes shone with growing resolve. By sunset, Maple Ridge Estates looked quiet again, but I knew better. Denise Harper's harassment was relentless. But with every step, she left evidence behind. Patterns we could analyze, repeated behaviors we could document. Observation was our weapon, and professional expertise would turn the HOA's overreach into undeniable proof. I walked to the old oak tree, resting my palm against its rough bark. My father had planted this tree as a promise, a legacy of resilience and endurance. Denise could try to intimidate, threaten, and harass, but she could never erase that. And now, with Laura reluctantly watching, documenting patterns, and me compiling evidence, we had a path forward. A way to expose her abuse professionally, step by step, without giving her a chance to claim we were overreacting. Tonight, the wind whispered through the oak branches, carrying the promise of accountability. The HOA's games were escalating, but so was our strategy. Denise Harper had started something she didn't understand, And she was about to learn exactly what happens when a Marine's patience meets professional precision. The morning sun barely cleared the rooftops when I noticed fresh tire ruts crossing the yard again. Someone had driven straight over the newly laid mulch, leaving deep grooves that glistened with dew. I knelt to examine the impressions, tracing the tread pattern with my fingers. Familiar. Denise's SUV. Again. This time, her Escalation was unmistakable. Lily leaned against the oak tree, rubbing her temples. Do they ever get tired? I shook my head. No, but every step they take leaves a trace, and every trace is a clue. I pulled out my camera and snapped photos from multiple angles, ensuring shadows didn't obscure the patterns. My mind ran through the details: the tire width, tread depth, the angle of the entry point. Professional observation was more than recording. It was interpreting behavior through evidence. "Ethan," Lily said softly, "they're literally driving across our lawn. Should we call the cops?" I considered it. Not yet. Evidence was everything, and a half-hearted complaint could backfire. Not yet. I need a full picture first. From across the street, Laura Kemp peeked over her fence. She waved hesitantly, notebook in hand, and I nodded. She'd begun documenting too, writing down times, sequences, and behaviors she'd never thought could be useful. Her fear was still there, but her attention to detail was becoming invaluable. Later that afternoon, I followed the tracks to the side gate. The locks were old and worn, and I noticed scratch marks around the latch. Not random wear, but deliberate attempts to bypass it. I photographed every detail, marking each one with notes in my digital log. "These aren't accidents," I murmured to myself. "She's trying to force her way in." I cross-referenced the timing of these intrusions with the HOA notices that had been arriving daily. Patterns emerged. Every visit coincided with some petty complaint, or a time when Lily was alone in the yard. Denise was teaching her kids, or anyone she could enlist, exactly when and how to intimidate. By late afternoon, I had compiled a folder of images, timestamps, and behavioral notes. It wasn't just observation anymore. It was a record of harassment, meticulously documented. Each photo told a story. SUV on lawn, gate tampered, son standing on porch, notes left on doors. Every repeated action reinforced the pattern. Lily joined me on the porch, frowning. "You really think this is enough to do something?" I nodded, showing her the folder on my tablet. Evidence isn't about emotion. It's about facts, patterns, behavior. We're turning her Escalation into a clear narrative, one she can't argue with. The wind shifted, rustling the oak leaves, and I noticed a subtle detail I hadn't caught before: the angle of sunlight hitting the porch where Tyler had stood the first day. By matching shadows with timestamps from Laura's notes, I could prove exactly where and when the intimidation happened. It was meticulous work, but precise timing is what separates speculation from proof. Laura appeared again, hesitant but steady. I wrote down the times and routes for the last week. All of them match your photos." I glanced over her notebook, every detail aligned. "Perfect. That's exactly what we need. Verification from an independent observer. Even if she tries to claim bias, this is corroborated." The sun dipped behind the rooftops, long shadows stretching across the yard. I leaned against the oak tree, thinking about the pattern forming in front of me. Each intrusion, each note, each intimidation attempt was a breadcrumb trail leading straight to Denise Harper. And every step had been cataloged, time-stamped, and cross-referenced. "Ethan," Lily said, wrapping a scarf around her neck, "do you really think we can stop her?" I rested a hand on the tree's rough bark. "We're not stopping her yet. We're preparing to expose her, professionally, every detail, every pattern. It's all turning into evidence she can't deny." For the first time, I felt a shift in the air. Denise's harassment had been relentless, calculated, and personal, but the very precision she relied on, the predictable timing, the repeated violations, had become our weapon. Laura's notebook, my photos, the timestamps, the scratches on the gate, all pieces of a puzzle coming together. Every attempt she made to intimidate, every petty violation she issued, was now part of the record. And when the time came, Maple Ridge Estates would see exactly how far Denise Harper was willing to go, and exactly how clearly we could prove it. The day began with a gray sky hanging low over Maple Ridge Estates. I stepped onto the porch, boots crunching the frost-hardened gravel, and immediately spotted new tire tracks cutting diagonally across the lawn. The pattern was unmistakable, Denise's SUV again, but this time, the tracks led directly to the side gate. Whoever drove it had been careless, slipping onto the property in a straight line rather than the familiar curve. I crouched to examine the prints, tracing the deep grooves with gloved fingers. The angle of entry, the depth of the treads, even the slight tilt from where the vehicle had swerved. Every detail told a story. Professional observation wasn't just about watching. It was about interpreting behavior through physical evidence. Lily appeared behind me, rubbing her temples. Every day, it's something new. How do you stay so calm? I didn't answer immediately. My eyes scanned the yard, the gate, the side fence. Calm, I said finally. I'm not calm. I'm collecting evidence. Everything she does leaves a trace, and every trace can be used to prove her harassment. From across the street, Laura Kemp peered over her fence, notebook clutched tightly. She hesitated, then started walking toward me, glancing over her shoulder like she expected Denise to emerge at any second. Her steps were tentative, almost fragile, but they carried intention. You're still doing this?" she asked softly. "Watching, recording, not saying anything to anyone?" "Yes," I said. "And every detail counts. Patterns, timing, repetition. That's what we need to make her behavior undeniable." Laura's lips pressed together, conflicted. "I see it, but what if she notices me? What if she punishes me?" I leaned slightly closer. "You've already noticed, Laura. That counts. Documenting quietly protects you. No confrontation, no risk beyond observation. But your knowledge, combined with mine, gives us leverage." She nodded slightly, but her hands twisted nervously in front of her. Fear still anchored her. I knew that, and I respected it. Fear sharpens observation. It doesn't have to paralyze action. I returned to the side gate and studied the scratches on the latch again. Something about them felt off. Not random wear, but deliberate attempts to bypass the lock. I traced the pattern with a pen, marking depth, angle, and consistency across multiple days. Each mark aligned with the dates of the latest HOA notices. Denise's harassment was now leaving a forensic trail. Hours later, after Lily went inside, I crawled under the porch and examined the perimeter sensors I had installed a week ago. Motion detectors, infrared triggers, and time-stamped alerts, all corroborating the physical evidence. Every intrusion, every approach by Denise's sons, every suspicious movement was now captured, recorded, and cross-referenced. Then, something clicked. I pulled up the spreadsheet where I had been logging every incident. Entry times, vehicle descriptions, notice. Timestamps, witness observations. Everything aligned perfectly. There was a pattern in Denise's harassment that pointed to premeditation, not random enforcement of HOA rules. Each incident was deliberately timed when Lily was alone, when neighbors were distracted, and when the cameras would capture the intimidation. Laura appeared at the edge of the yard again, glancing nervously at my screen. You can really prove she's doing this on purpose?" "Yes," I said firmly. "And once we have everything lined up, photographs, videos, logs, and witness notes, it becomes undeniable. Professional observation, methodical recording, and pattern analysis will expose her harassment. It's precise, it's legal, and it's indisputable." Her hands trembled slightly. I want to help. I think I can watch closer, write down more. But I'm scared." I nodded, understanding completely. "Good. Fear keeps us alert. Just record what you see. Don't confront. Don't interfere. Let us collect the story from the evidence itself." The gray sky deepened, casting long shadows from the oak tree across the yard. I traced my fingers along the rough bark, remembering my father's hands pressing sap into the grooves decades ago. This tree had survived storms, neglect, and time. And so would we. Every scratch on the gate, every tire mark, every note left by Denise Harper, now connected into a clear narrative. And tonight, when the wind whispered through the oak branches, I realized we had stumbled onto something bigger. Her harassment wasn't random. It was systematic, patterned, calculated. Laura's reluctant vigilance, my photographic evidence, and the detailed observation of repeated behavior had created the first threads of a case that could unravel Denise's reign of intimidation. Tomorrow, I knew, would bring more of her attempts, but for the first time, I could see the way to turn them against her, professionally, precisely, and without putting ourselves at unnecessary risk. We were ready to catch her in the act. The wind howled through Maple Ridge Estates that night, rattling the oak branches against my window like impatient fingers. I hadn't been sleeping much lately, not with the pattern so clear and the evidence finally aligning. Every incident Denise staged had become sharper in my mind. Her sons, the fake violations, the tire tracks cutting across my property like scars. But proof wasn't enough. I needed something indisputable, something irrefutable. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. Unknown number, a text. "She's at your fence. Come quietly." I pulled on my jacket and stepped outside. The air was bitter, the kind that burned your lungs with each breath. From across the street, I saw a faint silhouette, small, tense, motionless. Laura Kemp stood near the mailbox, her phone trembling in her hands. "Laura," I whispered. She didn't turn. "Don't talk, just look." I followed, her gaze toward the side of my yard. Under the motion light, Denise Harper crouched near the fence, flashlight clenched in her teeth. She wasn't alone. One of her sons stood guard near the SUV, scanning the street. The faint sound of metal scraping wood reached us. My sensors blinked red in silent alarm. Laura raised her phone, hands shaking, and filmed it all. "She's been doing it for weeks," she whispered, "loosening the screws on your cameras so she can slip by without being recorded. I caught her twice before, but I didn't have proof. Tonight, I do." The adrenaline hit instantly. Denise, the self-appointed queen of Maple Ridge, tampering with private property under cover of night. This was beyond harassment. This was criminal. "Keep recording," I said quietly. Laura nodded, tears catching the glow of her screen. "I'm scared, Ethan. If she finds out I filmed this..." "She won't," I cut in softly. "You're doing the right thing. This changes everything." We stayed silent as Denise worked the latch, twisting until the gate gave a faint pop. Then she slid something small, a folded note, through the gap and retreated to her SUV. Her son followed. The taillights flared red, then vanished down the street. When the sound faded, Laura exhaled shakily, clutching her phone like a lifeline. "I don't want to be part of this anymore." She threatened to fine me for non-compliance last week because I didn't attend the HOA meeting. I can't live like this. I looked her straight in the eyes. "You just helped everyone here. You don't realize it yet, but you've given me the proof I needed. Physical tampering, intent, coordination. The whole pattern falls apart once we show this." Her lip quivered, but there was a spark beneath the fear. "You really think this will stop her?" "Yes," I said, "because when the evidence speaks, people listen, even the ones too afraid to act. You gave me her voice without her knowing it." We watched the video together under the pale porch light. Every sound was crisp, the metallic screech, the muffled whispers, Denise's flashlight beam flickering across the wood. It was perfect. It was damning. Laura finally smiled, though it trembled. "I guess I just crossed a line I can't uncross." I put a steady hand on her shoulder. "You crossed into courage. That's the difference." By the next morning, I'd extracted still frames, synchronized timestamps from my sensor logs, and matched the motion alerts with her footage. Every detail lined up. Time, location, action. All undeniable. My professional training took over. I drafted the report the way I would have documented a security breach years ago. Clear, factual, airtight. When Lily came downstairs, coffee mug in hand, she paused at the sight of the footage paused on my screen. "She really did it," she whispered. "And Laura, she filmed it?" "Yeah," I said quietly. "She risked everything to do it, and now we can act." Outside, the oak tree swayed gently, its leaves whispering like old secrets. The morning sun cut through the fog, painting the lawn in silver light. For the first time in months, the air didn't feel hostile. It felt charged, alive with possibility. Laura's footage wasn't just evidence. It was the turning point. Denise had crossed from intimidation into trespass, and the proof was in our hands. The next step wasn't survival anymore. It was justice. The morning sunlight spilled across our yard, illuminating every inch of the oak tree and the tire tracks that had become so familiar. I sat at the kitchen table, laptop open, coffee cooling beside me, and stared at Laura's footage. Every frame, every metallic scrape of Denise's hands on the gate, every faint whisper. It all aligned perfectly with my sensor logs. Patterns, timing, repetition. A roadmap of harassment turned into concrete proof. Lily leaned against the counter, arms folded, eyes tired. "You really think this is enough to stop her?" "I think it's enough to make her accountable," I replied. "We're not just going to complain. We're going to expose a pattern she can't argue with." I pulled up a spreadsheet where I'd logged every incident for weeks, times, dates, types of harassment, corresponding HOA notices, sensor alerts. The pieces were aligning like a puzzle. Each screw Denise had loosened, every SUV tire mark, every note sent through the mail. They weren't isolated events. They were deliberate, orchestrated intimidation. Laura arrived just after 10, notebook in hand, face pale but resolute. I kept tracking them last night," she said softly. "The SUV left again. Tyler and Chase were with her. She circled the block, then checked the cameras near the pool." I nodded. "Perfect. That's exactly what we need. Every attempt she makes to evade documentation proves intent. You're giving us real-time reinforcement of the pattern." Her hands trembled slightly as she placed the notebook on the table. "I'm scared, Ethan, but it feels right, recording, tracking, seeing it for myself." "That fear is good," I said. "It keeps you alert, precise. We're not exposing ourselves recklessly. We're collecting professional evidence. Everything we've gathered can stand up to scrutiny, even Denise's claims of bias." I projected the video onto the wall. "Look here," I said, pausing at the frame where Denise's hands twisted the gate screws. "Sensor triggered. Timestamp matches the HOA notice about the supposed non-compliance. She orchestrated this to appear legal, but we have proof of tampering, proof of intent, and a documented pattern." Lily whispered, "It's overwhelming." "I know," I said, "but that's why strategy matters. We're building an airtight case. Once we combine the footage, logs, and witness observations, it's indisputable." I turned to Laura. "Next step, structured documentation. Every observation, every timestamp, every motion alert. We'll create a professional report as if this were a security breach, because technically it is. Property tampering, harassment, coordinated intimidation, each detail strengthens our position." Laura nodded, flipping through her notes. "I can summarize routes, times, and sequences for the past month. Include the deviations from normal patterns." "Exactly," I said. "Deviation proves intent, repetition proves strategy, and your notebook bridges the gap between what we saw and what the HOA will claim. You're essential, Laura." We spent hours mapping her notes to my sensor logs and the footage, linking each act to a corresponding HOA violation notice. I marked every timestamp and annotation, color-coded patterns, and highlighted sequences that clearly demonstrated coordination and planning. Denise's harassment wasn't random, it was systematic. By late afternoon, a draft strategy emerged. I would present the compiled evidence in 3 stages. First, an internal HOA briefing with documented proof. Second, a formal complaint with timestamps, photos, and video. Third, public exposure if they attempted to dismiss it. Timing would be crucial. Every detail had to be exact, and every step measured. Finally, I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my face. The sunlight fell across Laura's notes, across the laptop screen, across the oak tree outside, a reminder of why we were doing this. Our home, our peace, our family legacy. Denise's attempts to intimidate, control, and manipulate were about to be turned against her, systematically, professionally, and publicly if needed. Laura's hand hovered over her notebook. I think I can handle more nights like this, quietly, watching, recording." I nodded. "That's all I need. Observation, documentation, timing, professional precision. We don't react out of anger. We respond with evidence." Outside, the wind stirred the oak leaves like silent applause. For the first time, Maple Ridge Estates felt less like a battlefield and more like a stage, one where the truth was finally gaining the upper hand. Denise Harper had pushed too far. And now, every move she made, every violation she staged, was going to be her undoing. By the next morning, the kitchen had turned into a command post. The table was buried under notebooks, printouts, and screenshots. My laptop hummed with quiet intensity as I organized files into labeled folders: video evidence, sensor logs, HOA notices, witness statements. Lily set a mug of coffee beside me and leaned against the counter. "You've barely slept," she said softly. "Neither has Denise," I replied. "Her sons circled the block again at 2 a.m. They're watching to see what we'll do." Her face hardened. "Then it's time to show them we're not afraid." I turned the laptop toward her. "Not yet. First we finish the report. Everything has to be airtight before we move. The first hit has to land clean." At exactly 10, Laura knocked on the door. She stepped in cautiously, clutching her notebook like armor. "I followed her again last night," she said. "Denise parked by the pool. She talked to 2 other board members, the treasurer and that guy from the landscaping committee. I recorded part of it from my car." I raised an eyebrow. "You sure you want to keep doing this?" Her answer was quiet but firm. "She's been bullying all of us for years. I just finally stopped pretending I didn't notice." She handed me her phone. I played the audio. Muffled voices, wind, then Denise's unmistakable tone. "I don't care if it's against the bylaws. Make the violation stick. If he fights it, we'll bury him in fines." Lily's hand went to her mouth. "She actually said that." Laura nodded. "It's all there. I made sure the timestamp matched the HOA's latest notice." I sat back, exhaling slowly. That was the missing piece. Direct evidence of intent. Her own voice confirming manipulation of authority. "This changes everything," I said. "We're not just defending ourselves now. We're exposing her abuse of power." Laura bit her lip. "What happens next?" I pointed to the folders on the screen. "We compile this into a timeline. The footage of her tampering, the timestamps from the motion sensors, your audio recording, and every false notice she's issued. Once it's aligned, it becomes irrefutable." "And then?" Lily asked. "Then we deliver it where it hurts most," I said. "The HOA board, the community, and, if necessary, the county enforcement office. We won't confront her emotionally. We'll present her with data, timestamps, and video evidence. She won't be able to hide behind the bylaws anymore." Laura looked uneasy. "She'll come after us for this." "She already has," I said simply. "The difference is, now we're prepared." We worked for hours, aligning every detail. The pattern was surgical, her actions coordinated with each notice, each intimidation attempt. Every night she loosened the screws on my cameras. A violation appeared in the mailbox the next day. Every time her sons came by, the HOA issued a fine the following morning. It was clockwork harassment. By evening, the report was ready. 77 pages of data, photos, transcripts, and logs. Professional formatting, time-stamped metadata, sequential alignment. It wasn't emotional. It was methodical, factual, airtight. I printed 3 copies and slid them into separate envelopes. One for the HOA board, one for county code enforcement, and one to keep sealed in my desk. Insurance. As I sealed the last envelope, Laura asked, "When do you deliver it?" "Tomorrow," I said, but not quietly. The community deserves to know what's been happening. The truth won't mean anything if it stays in an inbox. Lily's eyes met mine, tired but steady. "You're really going to do it, aren't you?" "I have to," I said. "She's been hiding behind the rules long enough. It's time the rules worked against her for once." Outside, the evening air was cool and still. The oak tree swayed gently in the breeze, its roots deep in the same soil my father once tended. That tree had stood through storms and seasons, patient, unbroken. I took it as a sign. Tomorrow Denise Harper would face something she couldn't fine, threaten, or intimidate into silence. Evidence, truth, and the will of a community that had finally had enough. The war she started on my lawn was about to end in front of everyone. The morning sun hit the Maple Ridge Estates cul-de-sac with a glare that reflected off freshly cleaned windshields. I stepped onto my porch, holding the first sealed envelope of evidence. Today wasn't about subtlety. It was about accountability. Denise Harper had pushed too far, and the patterns we had documented, tire tracks, tampered cameras, time-stamped violations, audio recordings, would finally speak louder than her intimidation. Lily appeared behind me, coffee in hand, eyes alert. "Are you sure you want to hand this over personally?" "I have to," I said. "If it sits in an inbox, it's just ignored. But if we deliver it directly, the board has no choice but to see it for what it is." Laura arrived shortly after, notebook clutched tightly. Her face still held traces of fear, but determination was setting in. "I've got the recordings," she said. "Video, audio, timestamps, all compiled." "Good," I said. "Every detail counts." We walked toward the HOA office at the end of the street, the gravel crunching under our shoes. The trepidation in the air was sharp, but the sense of purpose was sharper. Neighbors peeked from windows and porches, whispers and curious glances following us as we approached. Inside, Denise was already there, clipboard in hand, smiling that fake, polished smile. Her sons lingered by the door, smirking. She looked up when we entered. "Ethan," she said, voice dripping with faux civility. "What brings you here?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I handed the envelope to the HOA secretary, pointing to the board members gathered around the table. "This," I said. "Everything you need to see about the harassment, intimidation, and tampering your president has orchestrated. It's all documented. Photos, video, audio, timestamps, logs. Every violation she's issued, every attempt to intimidate my family, every tampering incident, it's all here." Denise's smile faltered, just slightly, as she glanced at the envelope. Laura stepped forward, her hands trembling but firm. "I recorded her last night. She was tampering with the gate, instructing her sons to watch us, coordinating with other board members to make false violations stick. The timestamps match the notices we've all received." The room went silent. The hum of fluorescent lights felt deafening. Board members exchanged uneasy glances, shifting papers nervously. Even the secretary raised an eyebrow, glancing at Denise. One of the neighbors, who had slipped into the back of the room, whispered, "I can't believe she's actually doing that." Denise's voice rose, a mixture of indignation and panic. "This is outrageous. These are private matters. You can't—" I cut her off. "Every action you took left a trail. Every step, every note, every tampering, every coordinated intimidation. It's all here, and the community is aware. You can't hide behind bylaws when your actions are deliberate and illegal." The board members murmured among themselves. Some flipped through the files, eyes widening. Others exchanged nods, as if seeing the patterns for the first time. Lily stood beside me, hand on my shoulder. "We're done being intimidated. This isn't about personal vendetta. It's about accountability." Denise's sons shrank back, their smirks gone, replaced by uncertainty. The power dynamic had shifted. Every calculated move, every attempt to scare, had been documented. And now the HOA president herself was facing the evidence. Laura's voice rang out quietly but firmly. "I'm done being afraid, and you can't threaten the truth." Denise's fake composure cracked. She glared, swallowing back words that could no longer carry weight. The room's tension was electric, the first real crack in her control of Maple Ridge Estates. Outside, the morning sun caught the oak tree in full light. Its branches swayed gently, leaves rustling like a quiet cheer. Inside, every glance, every piece of evidence, and every corroborating voice had transformed fear into accountability. For the first time in months, the imbalance of power had shifted. Denise Harper's games had been exposed, professionally documented, and corroborated. And Maple Ridge Estates was watching. Tomorrow, the final confrontation would happen. Public, undeniable, and unavoidable. The HOA meeting room was packed, far more than usual. Chairs creaked under the weight of curious neighbors, some leaning against walls, others perched on the edges of folding seats. Fluorescent lights cast harsh reflections off polished tables. The air buzzed with tension, a mix of fear, anticipation, and silent rebellion. Denise Harper sat at the head of the table, clipboard clutched like armor. Her sons hovered nearby, uneasy, shifting from foot to foot. She glanced at me with a practiced smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. I stepped to the center of the room, motioning for Lily and Laura to join me. The envelopes, evidence compiled over weeks, were in my hands. My voice cut through the murmurs. "This," I said, holding up the first envelope, "contains proof of repeated harassment, intimidation, and property. Tampering orchestrated by Denise Harper, president of this HOA." Denise's lips tightened. Ethan, that's... I held up a hand. Let me finish. Each notice of violation, every vehicle mark on my property, every tampered camera and motion sensor, all of it is documented, time-stamped, photographed, and video recorded. I projected Laura's video onto the wall. The room went silent as Denise crouched near the side gate, flashlight in her mouth, twisting screws while whispering instructions to her sons. Every motion, every word, every detail matched the incidents we had logged for weeks. A neighbor whispered, "I've seen her do that." I continued, voice calm but firm. "This is not speculation. This is professional observation. Every step she took was deliberate, coordinated, and intended to intimidate my family and, by extension, any resident who opposes her." Denise's fake composure faltered. Her sons fidgeted. One whispered, "Mom, maybe we should..." I ignored them and addressed the board. "You were entrusted to uphold the rules fairly, not to weaponize them. The evidence here is clear. Denise Harper abused that trust." Lily stepped forward. "We've lived in fear, but it ends today. We are showing you the truth, not just for us, but for everyone here. We deserve an HOA that enforces rules equally, without harassment." Laura added, her voice steady now. "I recorded this because I was afraid, but fear isn't justification for hiding the truth, and this video shows exactly what happened." The board members exchanged uneasy glances. Some whispered to each other, others flipped through our reports. Denise opened her mouth, then closed it, realizing every defense was undermined by timestamps, videos, and logs. I don't know what to say," she stammered, a rare crack in her facade. "You don't need to say anything," I said. "The evidence speaks for itself." A murmur ran through the room. One neighbor raised a hand. "I've seen the harassment too, and now it's clear this wasn't random or personal misunderstandings. It was intentional." Another added, "We've been too afraid to speak up, but the pattern is undeniable." Denise's sons shifted uncomfortably. Their smugness evaporated. The aura of control she had cultivated for years was disintegrating, replaced by uncertainty and scrutiny. I handed copies of the compiled evidence to the board members. "Each of you has the responsibility to act on this, or be complicit in the abuse. The choice is yours." Denise's voice rose, weak but loud enough to carry. "This is unfair. I'm just following the rules." "Not anymore," I said. "Following the rules doesn't mean breaking the law, threatening residents, or tampering with property. You failed in every one of those areas." The room was still for a long, tense moment. The neighbors' eyes, usually cautious and downcast, now held something new: resolve. Collective awareness shifted the power dynamic. Denise Harper's reign of intimidation had crumbled under the weight of undeniable, professional evidence. The board president cleared his throat, flipping through the documents. We need to review this thoroughly. Immediate action will be required. This is serious." Denise sank into her chair, defeated. Her sons looked around, their earlier confidence replaced by shame. The community had witnessed the full scope of her abuse, and for the first time, justice felt imminent. Outside, sunlight fell on the oak tree, casting long shadows across the yard. The same tree that had silently stood through months of intimidation now seemed to watch over the neighborhood, witness to the reversal of power. And as I stepped back from the podium, I knew one thing: Maple Ridge Estates would never be the same. The morning after the HOA meeting, Maple Ridge Estates felt different. The air was lighter, the sun warmer, and the streets quieter without the tension that had lingered for months. Denise Harper was still present in her home, but her aura of control had evaporated. The board had promised immediate action, and the community now understood the full extent of her harassment. I stepped onto the porch with Lily and Ben, our son, at my side. The oak tree swayed gently, leaves rustling in the soft breeze. Ben kicked at a pebble, laughing, oblivious to the weeks of tension that had gripped our lives. For the first time in months, I could breathe without the weight of intimidation pressing on my chest. Lily rested her hand on my shoulder. "You did it," she said softly. "We did it." I smiled, but my thoughts drifted to Laura. She had been terrified, hesitant, and yet she had found the courage to provide the critical evidence that had shifted the balance. Without her, none of this would have been possible. I found her across the street, stepping out of her house. Her face was still pale, but her eyes held quiet pride. I waved her over. She approached, hesitant at first, then relaxed as she realized the fight was over. "You did more than I ever expected," I said. "You were the turning point. Your recordings, your observations, they changed everything." Laura nodded, still absorbing the magnitude of her contribution. I just wanted to do the right thing," she admitted, "even if I was scared." "Fear doesn't make you weak," I said. "It makes you human, and using it to be cautious but still act, that's courage." Across the neighborhood, I noticed neighbors emerging from their homes, stepping into driveways, exchanging smiles and nods. The collective sense of relief was palpable. Maple Ridge Estates had endured months of manipulation, and now, for the first time, the community could feel safe and respected in their own homes. I glanced back at my porch, remembering the first confrontation with Denise. The fear, the injustice, the late nights of documentation and observation. All those moments had led to this: accountability, resolution, and the restoration of peace. Lily wrapped her arm around me. "What now?" she asked. "We rebuild," I said. "Not just our home, but the trust in this community. We make sure the HOA serves the residents, not terrorizes them. And we stay vigilant. Abuse thrives in silence. We won't give it that space again." Ben ran ahead, waving to neighbors who returned his greeting. I felt a sense of pride swell inside me, not just for my family, but for the neighborhood that had quietly endured and now could celebrate a restored balance. I turned to the oak tree, its branches swaying like a sentinel over the street. That tree had seen storms, neglect, and seasons of growth and decay. It had survived, and so had we. The lessons of the past weeks were clear. Observation, courage, and meticulous preparation could confront even the most entrenched abuse. Evidence and professionalism had spoken louder than threats and intimidation, and the courage of even one conflicted neighbor had tipped the scales toward justice. Laura smiled at me one last time before heading back to her house. "Thanks," she said simply, "for showing me it was possible to stand up." I nodded. "You've reminded all of us that standing up doesn't mean being fearless. It means acting, even when you are." As we returned inside, the sunlight falling through the windows felt warmer, softer. Maple Ridge Estates had changed. The fear that had gripped it for months was gone. The community now had a shared sense of empowerment, and we, as a family, had reclaimed our home, our dignity, and our peace. And as I reflected on it all, I realized something important. No matter the intimidation, no matter the obstacles, careful observation, courage, and truth always have a way of prevailing. For anyone watching this story unfold and feeling powerless against unfair neighbors or authority, remember this: evidence matters, courage matters, and the right strategy can turn the tide. If you followed this journey, hit subscribe, because knowing how to stand up and seeing it in action might just help you protect what matters most in your own life.